Welcome to Fulfilling This Belly Sting, a show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Leave it at that.
God Morgan, and happy Tears Day to you. Today we talk about the Norse god Tyr. Now, a question I get quite frequently is, do I have to believe in and subscribe to the Norse understandings and legends to really embrace all of these teachings? And the answer is no. Quite honestly, you can believe whatever you want. You're in charge of what's up here. No one else, just you. So, today, before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed us on the multitude of platforms that this show is aired on. I want to also call out my friends and family at New Reality TV. newrealitytv.com is a new streaming channel dedicated to perspectives, many different perspectives of our spiritual journey. Remember, our spiritual journey and our physical journey are not different. They're one and the same. So check out newrealitytv.com for a plethora of perspectives that can hopefully help you obtain or maintain your mental space. If you do find you have questions about me, my teachings, my shows, or want to ask me a question, by all means, visit my website at norsewhispers.com, and there you can also find a page dedicated to a life coach who will listen and kind of observe and understand at a much greater level and hopefully help you to find those pieces that you are looking for to become successful up here. Remember, that's really where it counts, is up here, not out here. Up here. All right. Today we're talking about Tyr, and Tyr, within certainly we see an evolution occur in our understanding of Tyr as he really began his recognition in the tribes of Germania long before the Norse. And in these tribes, he represented more or less the same type of role we find Wotan and Odin taking over later. He was one of the chief gods. Now, one of the things that he represented, for lack of a better word, was justice and law. He's keeping things in balance. Remember, justice and law is not the same as equality. It's not the balance that we seek. It is only but one thing, right? So it's simply a written down rule that we all subscribe to. when we speak of justice in law is very regional. It's typically very localized. This is why laws that apply maybe in Spain don't apply here in the United States. They're very regional, right? So they're kind of dependent on that society, on that community. That's to be expected. What we don't want to get in our minds is that this whole idea of good and bad. This whole idea of good and bad comes from this misinterpretation of these regional areas. So when we talk about laws that are good for one community, one society, may not be as applicable in another section of the world. They're just different, and that's okay, right? So when Tyr first came to mind, when Tyr first came to his recognition, and we really see more about him occurring, he's really representing justice and law. Now, this will change, right? Because what we're going to find is as the Norse peoples and the Germanians moved northern across the Elbe River into the Jutland of Denmark, was we really see him come into a second saga, or a second really recognition of what he was. Tyr became the keeper of courage. Tyr represented courage due to his willingness to put his hand in the mouth of Fenrir, that Fenrir would be chained. Remember, Fenrir, the giant wolf, son of Loki, was pretty much chaotic. That's what he did. He pretty much wrecked everything. And so the gods all got together, and they kept finding chains to try to hold him, and of course they couldn't. Ultimately having a very specific chain, forged by the dwarves to hold him. Now, Fenrir, knowing what he is, said, the only way you're putting that chain around my neck is if one of you is willing to put your hand in my mouth. Now, Tyr knew he was going to get bit. He knew it. I mean, just as sure as day. But he also knew that the greater good of chaining Fenrir would be upheld. And sure enough, as the legends say, as the chain was placed around Fenrir's neck, Fenrir would then bite off the hand of Tyr. Now this, from a reality perspective, from a back to earth perspective, means a couple of things. Now, we also know that there were several tribes in Germania at the time. This is based on the historical record, who fought left-handed. They did this because their opponents were typically right-handed and trained by the Romans as right-handed warriors. So these tribes would fight left-handed, giving them an advantage on the battlefield. Right? So this really is where we see this legend of Tyr come to life. Now, what Tyr represents, however, is more important to us in the modern day than, obviously, a now left-handed warrior, is it represents courage. But courage is not the absence of fear. And we need to be very clear about that. Courage is not that we don't experience fear. It simply means that even in the overwhelming sometimes face of fear, we're able to continue forward. We're able to continue our forward progress. So there are many things in our lives that will take courage. As an example, one of those things is to look deep within ourselves. We've spoken on many occasions now about the well of the self. And the well of the self at the bottom, of course, is the rocks that holds our virtues and our values, our personal, what makes us us. Okay? And so those values are down there. Now, having said that, sometimes there's a lot of ego and maybe even some bravado in the waters of that well. So getting through it all the way to the bottom, where we may reveal what are our values, what are our virtues, what makes us us. Because remember, it's these rocks that help us to make our life's decisions. That's what this energy coming from our emotional filters travels down through the well of the self, through these rocks, to our energy source called our heart. Our heart is super central because what it's going to do is then release chemicals into our body. Our hormones, the cortisol, all of these different hormones are released into the bloodstream that then create an emotional state, a recognizable emotional state. But for us to be able to reveal those values, sometimes we have to be willing to move aside shame and blame and what we consider our perspectives. Remember, we're looking at these feelings, these emotional energies. We may be looking at them through a very jaded view or a very changed view by now, right? So as we're looking down through ourselves, we may go, man, we shouldn't have done that, or wow, I didn't intend that to happen, right? So all of these things are going to occur, and we're going to have to look down through them to see our virtues. What are our virtues? One of the things that my grandparents would instruct me as I kind of really began my spiritual journey and spiritual understanding was this idea that I controlled the rocks at the bottom of this well. Those values that I hold dear, near to my heart, those virtues that simply is how I make my decisions in life, all of these things I control. I'm in charge. I get to decide which rocks stay and which rocks go. I get to decide the pattern that they're laid out in, i.e., what's more important, right? So all of these things I have control over and I'm in charge of. Now, in many cases, what we find, particularly early in our lives, is that our parents and other authority figures in our lives will put these rocks in our well. Well-intentioned, right? There are some people who not so much, but some people put rocks in our well as well-intentioned. You know, our parents try to teach us the right way to go. Maybe some authority figures early in our lives have a good value system, and so they're providing rocks, valuable rocks, that we have a choice whether we're going to carry beyond when they hand it to us, as whether we're going to keep it in the well, right? So we get to decide this. We get to decide what our values are, what our virtues are, what we're going to stand for, and what we're not. Okay, so kind of both sides of the coin. One of the most empowering ideas that my grandparents gave me as I began my psychic journey, and certainly channeling with the ancestors, was this idea of freedom, the emotional and societal freedom that comes with recognizing our authentic self, who we are. When we arrange those rocks the way we want them, we keep the rocks that we want down there, we establish a mental freedom. A freedom to change our perspective, a freedom to look at things in a different way. Okay? That's what we do. That's the value in our modern day life of revealing these rocks at the bottom of our well. However, as we begin this journey, of looking through what we perceive as shame or, pain or embarrassment. All of these things are going to be in the water. We have to be willing, able to look through all of that. Why is this embarrassing? Why was that shameful? Why was this that or this the other thing? Right? What caused us to go that direction? Well, as I've learned now, as the energy comes down from our emotional filters down into the well of the self, we can take a hard left, right? We can hit the surface, and if the surface looks too murky or there's just too much turbulence in the water, we can bounce out the side. When we bounce out the side like that, we build up the silt in the sheath of truth. Now, I think my ancestors, as they defined for me this idea of a sheath of truth, one of the things that really came to mind was living our authentic self, living our authentic life. And that's really what the sheath of truth represents. Now, after the sheath of truth in our thought process, we come to the me gate. And the me gate is where we can either let it go, just whatever, right? Or we can control that narrative. We can decide what energy passes from the me gate into our memories. We get to decide. What does this mean? Well, this gives us a lot of hope that we can make choices. We are not forced to feel what other people are trying to feel, to make us feel, right? We can make that choice. We can choose to be happy. We can choose joy, harmony, peace, love, regardless what others' energies, what other influential energies are attempting to change that. So we are in charge. We can control how we feel, when we feel, how long we feel it, and what we take away from it. We get to choose. That's a very liberating, very free thought and understanding. We're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about how you can go from where you are today, establishing your authentic self, embracing with both hands the courage represented by the God tier in your life to become your authentic self and to find this mental and emotional freedom that comes with understanding who you are. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll show you how you can do it for you.
In the air. The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me.
It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
newrealitytv.com.
Welcome back, and thank you for taking that quick break with us. And thank you so much for my friends and family at New Reality TV. Wonderful collection of just a plethora of wonderful perspectives that can help you. Today we're talking about the courage, and we're talking about finding our authentic self. We're talking about using the courage represented, role modeled, if you will, by the Norse god Tyr. Now, courage is the ability to power forward when we seem overwhelmed by fear. So how at intrinsic reflection, one of the things we're going to start doing is asking ourselves questions. how do I feel about this? What do I think about this? What do I feel about this other thing? All of these different pieces, we're going to begin to ask ourselves questions, and we're going to do it in our mind. Now, I would recommend that we make notes about the answers. I know it kind of defeats the idea of external stimuli if we're writing, right? But bear with me. If we begin to write these things down, answers to our questions, how do we feel about, as one example, how do we feel about monotheism? Okay? And I'm just picking one, but pick anything. How do I feel about my significant other? How do I feel about homelessness? How do I feel about the natural disasters currently? I want to begin to note how I feel about these things, right? And I'm going to say, well, as far as the disasters in Texas, I am just, my heart is breaking for those people. It is just breaking into bits. I am feeling so horrible for them, and I recognize that, it's just occurring, and these are experiences. Think about the fear of, being in your home and watching the water rise around your home. How fearful that would be. And I begin to think about, well, how do I feel about that? And I write it down. As I write these down, now this is really the kind of the premise of journaling, but ultimately we're just going to write some of these answers down. And then 2 days later, we're going to do it again. And we're going to ask maybe even the same questions. And now we're going to begin to frame in, what are our values underneath this? Well, I can, as an example, my feelings about the folks in Texas whom my heart breaks for. I pray every minute that friends are found and family members are recovered and they're just injured maybe and not lost to us forever. Why is this? Well, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, I love people. That's who I am. I love people. I believe in harmony. I believe in peace. I believe in love. I love all people. Put a pin in that. Why? Because that's how I feel about people. And so I can begin I've asked the question is, how do I feel about the people in the disasters of Texas? I've answered that question. I then ask the same question again. Well, why do I feel this way? Why is my heart breaking for the people in Texas? Well, because I love people, right? So I'm starting to dig deeper and deeper. And so I'm finding my rocks. One of my rocks, of course, is harmony. I love harmonizing with other life forms, regardless if they're human or not. Okay? I mean, I'm thinking of the animals as well in Texas, who may not understand what's going on. So they're really afraid. They're terrified because they don't understand. Okay? So, again, in much the same way, I have gone from asking myself a question to discovering what my core value is. My core value, of course, being the love of all people, irrelevant, the love of all life, period. Right? And so, yes, I am one of those people who prays to the grass before I cut it to mow my yard. But I pray to the grass first, that they may know that it is only to promote their growth and to help them to obtain this growth that they are meant to be. Again, it's all about the love. Now, I have drilled down. This is where the journaling will help you to drill down for yourself. Think of these different scenarios. Think of your work, and how do you feel about a colleague? How do you feel about a particular colleague? Or maybe how do you feel about your colleagues at all? Right? How do you feel about your job? And then figure out why. Why do you feel that way? I'm amazed how the universe really stipulates or kind of everything is in cycles, in that we really start our lives when we're very, very young, asking, what's the favorite question of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old? Why? Why is this way? Well, guess what? That question serves us very well as we get older and we begin to understand this thing called a physical existence. Why? Why do we feel that way? Why do we act this way? Why do we behave? And why do we associate this way? Why? As we begin to ask ourselves this question, we begin to drill down. Now, this really goes to the method that we call chunking down. So in the psychological circles, trainings, they'll talk about a way of getting to your destination, if you will, is by chunking the journey down, breaking it down to where we can understand it better and come to a resolution within our mind about a particular subject. It also goes to when we're taking on emotional energies and we're getting kind of inundated with this emotional energy for whatever reason. If we can break that, if we can use our cognitive space then to break that down a little bit, kind of chunk it up a little bit, we have a better opportunity to manage the emotional energy created by it. All right, so we're not traumatized. We're chunking it down. Sometimes we may have traumatic events occur in our lives. The floods, certainly in Texas, is a very traumatic event for those living through it. How do you deal with this? How do you chunk this down? Again, it's a matter of breaking it down. And by journaling, by asking yourself these questions and writing down the answers, and then a couple days later, do it again and again, maybe, we can begin constantly, when you're reviewing your notes from the intrinsic reflection and you're kind of looking at your notes, this is the time we're going to ask why. Why do I feel this way? Why? Well, if we keep going on my activity as far as my heartbreaking, finding that I love life, and why is that? Why do I love life? Well, I love life because I love interacting. I love having different perspectives brought to my attention. I love the feel of different energies occurring in my life. I thrive on it, right? And yes, even negatives, energies presented by some people, sometimes, for me, it's kind of if you almost will, a comic relief, right? So some people come into my life and they decide that they are simply going to be negative to all things that I'm talking about or teaching about, and that's okay. I understand. But sometimes these people are just being, just producing negative energy for the sake of negative energy. They really don't believe. They may not even believe what they're saying themselves. So they're kind of trying to assign this energy to me. And so sometimes I find that hilarious. My key, or my focus here today, is we're talking about courage, and we're talking about the Norse god Tyr as a role model for this courage, is we have to be willing to look past this shame, past a perceived shame or guilt or anger or frustration. We have to be willing to kind of push that stuff to the side, like you would if you were swimming down to your rocks. We're going to push that stuff to the side that we may actually see and reveal the rocks that lie at our core. And here's the wonderful benefit is that you have a choice as to whether you're going to keep those rocks, rearrange those rocks, or take those rocks out. No longer have that value. And that's okay too. You are in charge of you. All right? Well, I hope you have a wonderful Tears Day today. I look so forward to seeing you tomorrow when we'll discuss Wotan and Othin and his quest for wisdom. We'll define what wisdom is. And we'll really begin a deep dive in understanding how we obtain wisdom even when we may not be paying attention at all. All right? So enjoy your Tears Day, and we will see you again tomorrow when we will talk about Othin and wisdom. Love and light, my friends.
Watching for Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Ulf Hefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.